In the previous video, we looked at the project follow-up, but related to schedule. The next thing to say is what's happening with the cost. And typically, cost follow-up is very important, but it also sometimes leads to the wrong conclusions. Now, what are we going to do? First, we're going to look at the Gantt chart and the cost information we find in the Gantt chart. We look at the project S-curve and the critical path position. We look at cost follow-up related to the classical approach and what are the possibilities, what are the different items that can go wrong here. And I just want to show you something about earned value management. We are not going to do a lot about earned value management in this course, but it's important that you know that it exists and what the basic principles of earned value management are. Now, let's have a look at the Gantt and the cost information. We have the Gantt like we had before, so we have the different activities, and what we're going to do now is to add the time-phased budget and the cumulative budget. In order to do that, we have to add costs to the activities, and I made it quite simple here. I gave for every period of an activity the same cost, so it's evenly based. It can be different. It depends on how you arrange your resources. So every period may have a different value. Now, it's very important that you estimate the cost as realistically as possible, because you're going to use this cost to verify what is the position of the project. And that will be done either the classical way, but like I said, it's dangerous, but also using what we call earned value management. So basically, first we start by determining the time-phased budget, and the programs do this automatically, and I did all of this in Excel. It's very easy to do. So first of all, period 1, the time-phased budget, the budget expected to be spent in period 1 is 15. The budget expected to be spent in period 2 is 15. And then we continue. For 3 it's 20, 4 is also 20, up till 6 it's 20, and then the last 2 periods it's only 10. So basically this gives us the time-phased budget, and it gives us an idea how much money we are expected to spend during the different periods. The next thing is to determine the cumulative budget. So we add the cost of the period to all previous periods. Now for the first period, that's 0, so 15 plus 0 is 15. For the second period is 15 plus 15 is 30. And then we continue, we have 50, 70, up to 130, which is basically what we call the S-curve, and we call it the S-curve because in general this curve resembles the S letter. Now, the last one, let's say that we are at the end of the project, the 130, we will call the budget at completion. Now, we can do this for the early start, for the late start, and for the planned start, and then we find the project S-curve and the critical path position. The green curve shows the project or the cost curve in early start position. The red curve is the S-curve in late start position, and blue is the planned start position, and we see it's between the two. It's not always the case because sometimes we have to extend the project and the things change a little bit, but basically the closer the blue line is to the green line, the more flexibility we have, and when it's closer to the red line, the less flexibility we have. So these are basically, that blue line is typically the line that we will use later for cost follow-up. Now, when we have the classical approach, we have the project baseline, the cost baseline, the green line here, and we see those budgetary intervals. And those budgetary intervals relate to the budgets that have been allocated to your project. Typically, the CFO or the financial department allocate budgets over time, and as long as you are within the budget, you can continue with the project. Now let's have a look with the classical approach. When we have a report, we are just looking at the cost, And what we see here, this first case, we are below or on the estimate. In this case, below. The other one, we are on the estimate. And typically, this is something which is expected to be positive. And the people are optimistic because they're below the cost. Practical experience has shown that basically this is not always the case. And people tended to find out that at the end of the project, they were above budget, and that was not good. So basically the classical approach is a little bit dangerous. We have here above the estimate, which is typically considered to be a bad sign, but we will see later that it's not necessarily something bad. There are different elements that we have. So these are the three relative positions related to the project baseline, but we also have to consider those related to the budget that we have available. And what we see for the three elements, the three positions that I've shown, they're all below the budget. It means the budget is okay. We can still keep on working. Even when we are above the estimated value, we have still money to spend. And basically we keep on working. But unfortunately, when we have a different position, when we are above the budget or typically around the budget, the financial department will stop the project. It happened a few times to me. You cannot continue. Now, basically, in the classical approach, either one of those has a clear conclusion. We cannot say this is a good one, this is a bad one. We cannot say anything because there are other parameters that we did not include. And that's where we talk about earned value management. The classical approach has a fundamental link because we're only looking at costs and we are not looking at the link between the cost and what we have produced. So earned value management introduces a parameter which is earned value. Earned value is in fact the value of the deliverables that I have created. And now we look at three parameters: the planned value, which is in fact the value on the S-curve that we planned, that we expect to find. The actual cost is the money we spent, but we also add there the value we created. And we can show this in this simple curve. I replaced it by a straight line, which is normally not the case, but it's easier to work with. It's easier to find some formulas that you will see later. So the S-curve and the planned value, so we are at after 7 days, and we plan to have created deliverables for a value of 70K. So that's one element that we have. Now we see the actual cost. The actual cost is below, which in the classical overview would say, well, this is good because we're below the S-curve. Now, when we add the earned value, the value we created up to this moment, we see that the earned value is below the actual cost and below the S-curve. What does it mean? Well, the S-curve combines the schedule information and the cost information. The earned value represents the schedule information. And I have to compare the earned value with the schedule information in the planned value. And I see that I planned to create value for 70K, but I only created value for 40K, which means I am behind schedule. On the other hand, I see the actual cost, although the actual cost is below the planned value. But what does it mean? The actual cost is above the earned value. And this means that I created a value of 40K, but at the cost of 55K. So basically what I see here in this graph, I am behind schedule and above budget. And those are two things we would not have found in the classical approach to project management. Basically, earned value management will give us that additional parameter to get a better estimate what will be the final cost of the project. And we've seen in the part of the finance that this is very important. And this also means that we have to be careful what's happening when we are measuring, because we now have a way to determine how much do I expect the project to cost at completion. And I can compare that with the financial parameters and say, hey, am I still within the constraints, the conditions of the business case? Yes or no? And when I find out that I am within those conditions, I can continue. When I'm outside of these conditions, I can find out what to improve and if it's still possible to find a solution to complete the project with a profit. So that's what I wanted to say to you about cost. Cost is very important. We verify the cost, but we also have to take into account that we should never forget to compare the cost with what we really created. So that was it for this video. I thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you, and bye-bye.